you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified of all future uploads, and check the description box below the video for important links and information. How you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. Recently, I've been putting more thought into bug-out vehicles or survival vehicles, or just features that you would want to have in your personal vehicle that could be helpful in any sort of disaster or shit the fan or preparedness situation. Because I have a very standard car, it's a four-door sedan, and I definitely want to, in as near the future as possible, upgrade to something that's a little more versatile, a little more rugged, has four-wheel drive, things like that. So I've been thinking more about the different features to be looking for and things to avoid, so on and so forth. And I mentioned this in my live stream that I did most recently. For those of you who tuned in for that, got to hear me talk about the subject of this video already, which is manual transmission for a bug-out vehicle. And is it a good thing, a bad thing, and so on. So I have several thoughts on it. I think that there are some obvious advantages and there's some obvious disadvantages, and there's one particular point that I think throws it over the edge for me, making one or the other specifically a better choice for most people for a bug-out or survival vehicle, or just a vehicle in general. And just give some background, my current car is a manual transmission. My car before that was a manual transmission. Other than my work van, the car before that was a manual transmission, and then my first car that I ever had was a manual transmission. So of like the 7-ish cars that I've had, 4 or 5 of them have been manual transmissions. So I have quite a bit of experience driving manual transmissions, and very comfortable with it. It's fun, especially if you have a cool car. It's a lot more fun, in my opinion, if it is a manual transmission. And there's a lot of advantages that come with that as well, not just from a driving perspective, because you have more control over the vehicle when it's shifting and things like that. It can be lighter usually than an automatic transmission, which if you're driving normally, it can give you better gas mileage. And also when it comes to gas mileage, there's different hypermiling techniques that you can use with a manual transmission that you can't necessarily do with a automatic transmission, such as putting it into neutral to coast and things like that and turn off the engine, which are some really aggressive, extreme techniques to really push your gas mileage as far as possible, which could be very important in a survival situation or shit the fan situation. You don't really have those options with an automatic transmission, at least not as many of them. Also, when it comes to some sort of mechanical problem, specifically related to like a battery or the starter, you can pop the clutch if you can get the car rolling, push it down a hill or whatever, get behind it, have someone help you push it, and then pop the clutch, and you can start the car that way as well. Another option that isn't available with a automatic transmission. The downside is, and this is one of the, it's basically the biggest downside, is one issue that I am going to most likely get a automatic transmission for my next car, specifically if it's a bug-out vehicle or a survival vehicle like that, is because it takes all 4 of your limbs to operate an automatic transmission, which means that even if you don't have an injury on any of those limbs, you still can't do anything else. So you can't hold a weapon, you can't use a walkie-talkie to communicate. I mean, potentially you can. Obviously, you're not constantly shifting gears, but in some situations you might be. If you're cruising down the highway, obviously you don't have to use all 4 limbs the entire time if you're just staying in one gear. But if you're in any sort of off-road situation, hills, anything dramatic, stop and go, things like that, you're going to be shifting a lot more often, and that uses all of your limbs. So you can't be operating a radio, a flashlight, a weapon, anything like that. And just the fact that you have to use all 4 of your limbs precludes you from driving or driving well if you're injured. If you have a broken ankle, if you have a messed up hand, if you're missing a hand, things like that, driving a manual transmission could be extremely difficult, maybe even impossible. And that is a very bad thing in a disaster scenario. So for me, it's just a huge issue that you have to have all of your limbs not only working right, but occupied when you're driving. And it's much more difficult, technically, to drive a manual transmission, especially if you drive it well in any sort of bizarre situations or non-standard situations. And that also prevents you from having someone else drive the vehicle, which sometimes can be a good thing. It's always joked that a manual transmission is a millennial anti-theft device because so few people know how to drive a manual transmission. When I actually went to buy the car that I have now, it was a used car, but they're still selling it from a dealership. The battery was dead because so few people could actually drive it. They'd show up to do the test drive not realizing it was a standard or a manual transmission, and then they just wouldn't be able to drive it, so they would leave. And the car sat there so long that the battery actually died. And I was the first person to show up who was actually able to like knew it was a manual, was able to drive it. So that could be a problem too. If you ever need someone to be able to drive for you, if you're injured to where you can't drive at all, or for just any other reason you want someone else to be able to drive the car, which makes a lot of sense, then that could be a big problem because most people don't know how to drive manual transmission. And even the people that do, a lot of them don't do it regularly and aren't going to be really proficient at it. So for me, that is the main couple of issues that make an automatic transmission a better choice for most people. And it's not something that's so serious that if your bug out vehicle as you have it is manual, that it's you should just get rid of it and try and find it's automatic. But since I'm looking into getting a vehicle in some hopefully soon amount of time, that I have made the choice. I'm probably going to go for a automatic unless there's just such a good deal on a manual or something like that. If there's other extenuating circumstances, it's not such a huge disadvantage that I would have, totally write it off, but it definitely makes it a clear choice for me that I think automatic is a better choice overall, because I'm most likely not going to be doing any sort of actual work on a transmission. So the complexity of either doesn't really matter. I don't have the skills or the ability to really crack open a transmission and fix it if it were to break anyway, whether that's a manual or an automatic. So that doesn't really factor into it for me. Just keeping the car in good running shape ahead of time is the best option there. And so that would be my opinion on the matter. I think that for most people, as an overall rule, automatic transmissions are going to be the better bet. And let me know what you guys think about that, and if what you currently drive, and if these things have been an issue, so on and so forth. And thanks for watching. Check out rulthewasteland.com, rulthewastelandblog.com, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching, and don't forget you can support yourself and this channel by checking out rulthewastelandstore.com, where we have an ever-increasing amount of survival and preparedness gear, including one of the best survival fishing kits on the market.